Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend and coach, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Jim, I'm good. I'm excited about our subject today, and as always, great time visiting with you before we
Yes.
we record.
Fruitful stuff. I don't know what we produce, but I always refer to it later on. It makes a difference, and it feels like casual conversation, but I doubt that it is just that. It feels like it's more in the long run. So, hey, tell us about this. You're going to talk about something that I do not suffer from this condition, but there are many, many, many who do. And I'm facetiously calling this, what I'm calling it, but what's our topic today?
Yeah, the title is called "The Beauty and the Beast of
Yeah,
Task Orientation."
task orientation.
Yeah. Now, I just confess to you right up front, I'm a firm believer in planning.
Yes. Yeah.
I, I have a nice little whiteboard here on my
Yeah.
right in my office that we have a 4 to 5 year picture out there in front of us. On there, we have annual goals, quarterly goals. I build
Yeah.
my week to-do list every week on the weekend, planning my upcoming week based off of my whiteboard and my calendar and things like that.
Love it.
There's something about long-term planning, for me at least, that gives way to a purposeful day-to-day work.
Yeah.
Uh, when I get to check off a quarterly goal on that whiteboard, there's a
Yeah.
sense of satisfaction that comes with that. Um, and I think that, there are pastors who do that well, and then there are pastors who don't have any of that, happening in their world right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, there's beauty in order.
Hmm.
This order is beautiful to me.
Yeah.
Um, but the truth is, there's also a beast
Yes.
to order. There's a dark side
Yes.
to being a planner. There's a dark side to being organized. And
It can be.
this is what I'd like to talk about today for a
Yes.
few minutes with you, Jim.
Yes. It's funny. I don't suffer from that condition, but I hire people who do because I recognize the tremendous need for lists and calendars and budgets and organization. The joke
Yeah.
here for years was if you don't like organized religion, come to the Freedom Center. We're really not that organized. Well, that was funny. And at some point it was crippling. The reality of that was
Yeah,
crippling.
that's right.
We didn't have the same language. We start service late. It was sloppy. And so a lot of engineers, a lot of people who start things on time, they didn't care for our church because it just felt too loose. And
Mhm.
everything was too loose. We haven't returned phone calls for 2 weeks because I hadn't gotten around to it, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So we really there is such a value to this, but I agree that if you're the one that's kind of analysis paralysis, you're paralyzed by unchecked boxes. That's the
Right.
beast. So what are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, so I'd like to look at three kind of darker side elements to this
Yeah.
task orientation. Please don't misunderstand. We're not saying to be disorganized.
No, 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 no. Yeah.
And you've communicated that beautifully. I just want to
Yeah.
reaffirm that. But
Yeah.
here's some things that I think happen when we are on steroids with task orientation that can really start to trip us up. The first one is this feelings of failure.
Yes.
Let me explain. So if if I have, like, on my whiteboard over here, I have like 7 or 8 goals for Q3 this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And if one of the quarterly goals doesn't get checked off, sometimes I feel like, man, didn't get there.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I feel like that was a failure. And somebody has said this, that failure is an event, not a person.
Yeah.
And I kind of like
Good.
that. I don't know who said it.
Yeah.
It wasn't originating with me. And I think what can happen if you're task oriented like I am, that your sense of value can get wrapped up in the dry erase marker
Yeah.
jotting on your whiteboard.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if you didn't mark everything off your list, your to-do list from last week, or maybe your goals were too aggressive or poorly thought out, or maybe life just got in the way of you
Yeah.
getting there. Some of the goals we set are interdependent on our team, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that it's very easy for somebody who is task oriented to feel like they failed if not everything got checked off,
Yeah.
and they can beat themselves up. And I think that's a dark side to
Yeah.
task orientation, this self destructive conversation that
Yeah.
you feel like you've failed because you didn't check everything off your list this week.
Right. Yeah.
I,
Yeah. I
I
had a
think that's
bad day
dangerous.
because I only got 80% of my boxes checked, or I had a bad quarter because I only got that's
Mhm.
is it, John, is this a true statement that that list makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master? Is that another way to look at
It
it?
can. It can if the list is unrealistic, it's
Okay.
unmanageable. Like I
Yeah.
used to, when I started doing this 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I was this focused on planning everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd have 12 or 13 things on every day on my list.
Wow.
It didn't take me long, about a couple of months, and I realized, okay, something's wrong here. I think
Yeah.
I'm shooting too high.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I've learned to narrow the list. I've gotten more interested in making sure the most important things are taken off that list or finished.
Hmm.
So, I
Hmm.
mean, it's a rare week that I check everything off my to-do list.
Okay.
It's a rare week.
Okay.
It's also a rare week when I don't get the top three things
Gotcha.
done on that checklist. So if I get the top three things, I identify that every before my week starts. What are the big three that I got to get done next week?
Yeah.
If I get those checked off and I've got maybe four or five tasks that I didn't finish that week, it's been a great week because
Yeah.
I got those three done.
Yeah.
And so I've become more realistic about it. And I realize that stuff just gets in your way sometimes that's legitimate
Yeah.
and out of your control. Talk about pastoring, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
there's
Yeah.
disruption that comes your way, and sometimes that just messes with your ability to get everything finished.
Yeah.
And so while I don't think we're saying don't do a list, here's what I am saying. Don't allow not checking certain things off your list to beat you up,
Hmm.
because sometimes stuff just happens and you
Yeah.
don't get it all the way to the finish line every week.
Yeah.
You know what you do? You push it to next week.
Yeah.
There is a next week.
Yeah. I like you're saying too that there's things that are more important than others on that list.
Mm,
That there are, if I don't get these top three done, I feel like that would be a legitimate reason for concern. But the bottom
agreed.
three, maybe it's on that list for 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks before they get done because it's that rare day where an appointment canceled and you were able to do that thing. It's you need to
That's right.
remind yourself of it, but not allow that to drive like I'm a failure unless I've checked all my boxes. But I like that thought that there's a different weight to different portions of that list. Every piece of
Right.
that list is not equally weighted. Because again,
100%.
I think that would set you up terribly for. I didn't pick up a gallon of milk. I'm a failure. That was just
No.
one of the things, that pick it up tomorrow. It's no big deal.
And what I've noticed is that is very tempting to start with the stuff that's not important. Uh,
Yes, the filler.
because
Yeah,
it's pretty
yeah,
easy. They're easier things.
yeah,
And so I try my best to front load my week
yeah.
with the things that are at the top of the list, the big three. I try to
So,
front load that.
true or false? You had to kind of learn ways to outsmart yourself. You had to
Hmm.
learn how you did lists to make
That's
this
right.
list actually be a better servant to you. So if it was a master,
That's right.
first couple of months it was a terrible master. So you really had to develop a process that works for you. Do you find
Yeah.
that when you're coaching people, is there one process that kind of would work for 80% of the people, or is it as individual as the individual how we
Yeah,
interact with our lists?
that's such a great question. I don't know if 80% is the right number.
Yeah, yeah,
I do think that there's probably three or four ways that dominate, like so
yeah,
there might be three or four ways to attack this
yeah.
that 98% of people it would work for with one of those
Gotcha.
four ways would work.
Yeah,
Um, but let me say this, the list has become a tool now.
good. That's about instead of saying master or servant, a tool. That
It's
that's a good
become
that's good
it's
language.
become a
Yeah,
tool in a
yeah,
good way
yeah.
for me and not a list that I feel like I failed if I don't check
Right.
everything off it.
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's the first dark piece of this task
Yeah.
orientation. Here's the second one. I think this one is even a little scarier, and that's forgetting about relationships.
Mm,
Uh, Relationships are more important than accomplishments.
there you go. Write that
I'm
one
not
down.
saying accomplishments don't matter. They do
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a calling on your life. You're being paid to do the work. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to accomplish things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
they matter, but people matter more.
Yeah.
And in my rush to achieve, sometimes people can get trampled
Hmm.
or neglected or forgotten. And in some cases we leave a trail of relational wreckage behind us. And
Yeah.
when we do that, God forgive us, right?
Yeah. Right.
Um, and here's the kicker to all of it. I can forget about my relationship with God.
Yeah.
I can be tempted to leave God out of my work.
Yeah.
And uh, it's a beast. It's
Yeah.
the dark side of it. And Jim, I wonder what your thoughts are on this second one about the relational aspect.
Yeah. I guess I'm reminded to go back to the law, all the different ordinances and all the different celebrations and feasts and fasts and holidays and holy days and, things you can do, things you can't do. And Jesus goes, what's really important is loving God and loving each other. And if you do those things, really the list of the other things that you'll fulfill both the law and the prophets if you have these two things. So if our walk with God is anything, it has to be relational. If we are accomplishing tasks at the expense of our relationship with God, our relationship with our families or with friendships, we have to be missing something, right? Even though we're remarkably productive, maybe we're not
Yeah,
producing the fruit that's actually going to be valuable 20 years from now or in eternity.
right.
Anything that takes you away. I mean, one of the things I said to the church when I came here was if my kid has a little league practice, he was 3 at the time, someday he's going to play baseball. And it's the same time your kid has a little league practice, and you want me to come to your son's little league practice. I'm not coming to your son's. I'm going to mine. I'm
Right.
gonna lead with my testimony, not with my activity. And there was a role that was kind of during that is that okay? Shouldn't pastors do everything we want them to do so we can judge them for doing the one thing they didn't do well? Or I just said, I'm going to take care of my family. And if my family needs me and your family needs me, my family gets me and your family has to figure it out. And it was part of my interview process before the church.
Mhm.
I won't compromise this. And we really have not had to, but there were like I missed my son's first goal because I was doing a funeral. And I don't know
Mhm.
why, but people don't tend to schedule their funerals 6 months in advance. They always do it like in the
Oh,
last minute. It's like it's an emergency or something. So I missed it, and I missed his first goal. I forgave myself. He never held it against me, but it's that sort of thing we just don't want to miss out on. We
right.
do want to be present because that's where ministry takes place. That's where family takes place. That's where worship takes place.
Yeah.
The things that are truly valuable take place when we are present, not when we're checking lists in our offices all day. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the leaving God out of work piece, is not necessarily, I'm not even thinking about work crowding out your time with the Lord.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about work and not inviting him into it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I before most of my appointments, um, I pray, Lord, please help me.
Yeah.
Help me to be sensitive to this person, to help me be a good listener. Or if I got a big writing project that I'm working on, God, please help me with the writing today. Help me to
Yeah.
get some revelation from you, maybe that I don't have. And
Yeah.
it's just inviting God along in your day. And so, if you're task oriented, one of the things that I believe you and I have to guard against is the neglect of relationships.
Mhm.
And when you get to the end of your life, I think this is how you'll feel, that the most important things in your life have nothing to do with how large a church is, how successful you are, how much money you have in the bank, how big a house you live in, what kind of car
Yeah.
you drive, how famous you are. What's going to matter at the end is relationships, your
Yeah.
vertical relationship with Jesus and the
Yeah.
horizontal relationship with the most important people in your life.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one of the dark sides of
Yeah.
uh, of task orientation is this whole relational challenge that can come along with it. So let me give you the third beast, and it sounds
Yeah.
like we're doing a study in the book of Daniel here or Revelation. It sound
Yeah.
that way, but it's fearing it's the fear of the unknown, and I want to explain this. Our task list can often serve as a security blanket, and I'll explain. As long as we're checking things off the list, we feel productive,
Yeah.
we feel successful, and this to-do list can become, if we're not careful, a straitjacket that prevents us from thinking creatively
Yeah. Yeah.
or strategically. Um, we here's some of the thoughts that I think a task-oriented person like me has sometimes, Jim, when I I'm stopping for a moment to think. It's like that idea is too crazy. I'm not even going to go there. So I can just get back to my tasks. I don't want to
Right.
spend any time entertaining that.
Right.
Or why am I just sitting here wasting time thinking?
Hmm.
Um, or why should I think about being innovative?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of like things the way they are, or the way they've always
Yeah.
been. And I'm checking off my list. I'm getting stuff done. And I think the tactical can trample on the strategic. It can trample on the dreaming. It can look,
Yeah.
if you're a leader, part of your job is to dream
Yeah. Good. That's good. Yeah.
and to think and to anticipate
Yeah.
um uh and so this but that's the great unknown for many of us who are task oriented, and it
Yeah.
scares us.
Hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about this third one, Jim.
Well, this is where I love it. I believe it or not, I schedule time for actually boredom, time to be alone with nothing really to do. Because when I drive through Ohio or up north on I-75, and you don't need a steering wheel for about 100 miles, it's just straight.
Yeah.
I get great thoughts. Like they just come to me. I don't know how to say it, but I get creative when I have nothing else pressing on my mind. It's almost like God's always speaking, but it's hard to hear with the noise of my life. And so when I'm fishing, when I'm sitting in a deer blind, when I'm driving, north or south on 75, that's when it feels like God speaks to me. So some of the great moments of my life happened because of hours of boredom that generated that thought or that gave me that impression, or I heard God speak. So no, I think this is one of the reasons the Sabbath is a prohibition of production. And this is
Mm.
why there's certain holidays and holy days in the Jewish calendar where it's like, no, you just don't do anything. What do you do if you don't work all day? Like, what do you do? It's like, well, there's something that comes out of letting God do work that you can't. There's something that
Hmm.
comes out of trusting him, that 6 days of work and one day of honoring him will be better than 7 days of work. But I think there's something too that just in those margins of Sabbath or in those margins of driving from here to there, turning the radio off, not listening to
Yeah.
music and politics and books and podcasts, silence. And that the party that's occupied by that task, mowing the lawn on a mower, driving down the road, fishing, it takes up a certain part of your brain, but it leaves another part of your brain free to kind of roam and explore.
That's
And
right.
that seems like that's when I find what God is saying most is not in the middle of my list.
Hmm.
It's in the middle of my rest.
Yeah.
Um,
And I love it, Jim. I think most of the good ideas that I've ever had in my life have come out of those kinds of
yeah.
moments.
Yep.
And I want to share a thought that one of my good friends shared. Um, his name is Chip Judd. We've quoted Chip before on this
Yeah.
podcast. He said, if you never take time to get quiet and think, you'll never have your own thoughts.
Wow. That's so good.
I just thought that was so powerful.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
only parrot the thoughts of other people. You'll never have your own.
Yeah. That's so good.
And so I know that being strategic, dreaming,
Mm,
imagining a different future
yeah.
is territory that just is the unknown for task-oriented folks. But
Mm,
want to encourage you to give yourself time to be bored.
yeah. Put it on the list.
Yes, to be
Yeah.
think to think. We call it. Somebody called it a. I can't remember the name of it now, but you set aside. It's just an hour or two a week. Get quiet.
Yeah.
Have a no electronics around you. A legal
Mm,
pad and a pen,
yeah.
and you might write something down at the top of that, like one thought you're trying to solve, and then for
Yeah.
an hour, all you do is think about that.
Yeah.
Whatever comes to you, you just write. You're right. It's called a clarity moment or a clarity hour, I think.
Yeah.
And so we think there's a lot of power in that, and we want to encourage you to tap into that.
Yeah.
So planning and organizing and executing are a leader's friend, right? Those are
Yeah.
leaders' friends.
Yep. Yep.
I'm gonna always appreciate the beauty of order, but I have to remember the dark side of this.
Yeah.
And here it is. I just want to give it to you. Failure to meet goals is not an indictment of your intrinsic value.
Good. Yeah.
People matter more than accomplishments.
Hmm.
And adherence to a to-do list sometimes will get in the way of higher level thinking. And we think that those three things, that you have this sense of intrinsic value no matter what is going on in your world, that you're valuable because you belong to Jesus,
Yeah.
that people are valuable. And sometimes you're going to be involved with people and it's going to go longer than you thought.
Hmm.
And it's going to crowd out some of the things that you had on your to-do list today. But that particular appointment is more important.
Yeah.
And we want you to exercise that atrophied muscle, if it's atrophied, that imagination muscle, that dreaming
Yeah.
muscle, because
Yeah.
we believe this is good for you. I'm just telling you, I'm confessing to you, I've got to work hard at this,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's worth it. It's
Yeah.
worth all the effort to not allow the dark side of being task oriented to get the best of you. So, Jim, that's what I
Love
have.
it. I love it. Thanks, John.
Okay.
It's funny. Like I said, you and I approach this subject from different views, but I got as much out of it. I think hearing what you had to say about organization as someone else who's a slave to their list, would have gotten out of it as well. So thanks for your wisdom on this. It's just wise, it's prudent. It's good stuff. So we hope that you've gotten out of it what we've gotten out of it by studying it and hearing it and interacting with it. And some of you listen to this with your staff, some of you listen to this with your spouse, some of you listen to this as you're driving down the street alone. But now that we're done talking, what are your takeaways? What are you going to do with what John has just said? Are you going to prioritize a list so that you're not a slave to the whole thing, but this is more important than that? Are you going to make sure that relationships are you going to find some place for boredom in your life? So maybe hear some creativity come from the Holy Spirit, or at least have a moment of peace, a moment of rest. When you're done listening to this, ask yourself those questions. And then we would just encourage you, apply it now, put it to work. It doesn't work if you hear it. It puts it to work if you put it to work. So put it to work. And if you're like, I'm not sure what to do with that, then convergecoach.com. There'll be a link right there. Schedule half an hour with one of our staff, one of our team, and we'll help you think through it. We'll look at your schedule. We'll look at your priorities. We'll look at your lists. We'll help you think through some things. Whatever happens in half an hour happens. At the end of that, no strings attached. If we can help you at a deeper level or to accomplish more, then of course we would love to do that. That's our joy. So God bless you guys as you form your lists, as you find your space, as your heart listens. God bless you as you lead from alignment.